Welcome to VR Hermits, a podcast about virtual reality development. I'm Dave Ramsey.
And I'm Joe Simpson. How's it going, Dave?
Doing really good, Joe. How you doing?
I'm doing good. So we were out last week, or you were out last week.
I was out.
Sitting right here. But we're back this week with some stuff to talk about. But what's going on? You were out at a non-VR thing, a FileMaker thing for your day job.
Yep. There was a conference in New Orleans. There was a kind of a grassroots FileMaker unconference kind of thing that was a heck of a lot of fun. It was organized and put on by the women of FileMaker, and so it had a slightly different flavor to it. One of the things that I found interesting, they had historically you kind of sign up for the thing and you can kind of just start grabbing time slots to present at, and they'll fill those up pretty quickly. And in the interest of getting more female presenters, they didn't let people sign up for those spots immediately. They threw out requests for presenters, and in the first week, like 95% of the people who proposed talks were male. And they didn't fill in any of those time slots.
Okay.
They just took the proposals and sat on them. And in the second week, something like 70% of the presenters that they got in were female.
Nice.
And so that may be something that works in other conferences, is just like, because that schedule will fill up within 24 to 48 hours if you let us do that. And so they didn't say anything. They didn't do anything. They just said, we're looking for more presenters. Second week, tons of female presenters signed up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting little tidbit. And so it was something like 60 to 65% female presenters. I don't remember the exact number, but it was well over 50. And so it just definitely gave it a different feel. The topic selection was a little different. I'm like, I can do this. What else are we going to talk about here? Let's talk about all of this stuff from a completely different angle, because shaking up these thought processes, and I'm as guilty as anybody else of falling into patterns of thought and ideas and whatever. So yes, please bring me 100 new viewpoints on the same stuff I've been thinking about all the time, because I'll fall into a rut. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Got to talk to a lot of users of my other software. And I also got to go to New Orleans for the first time since Katrina. And it turns out I really missed that town. So I'm going to have to go back again.
Nice.
So yeah, so you've been doing other stuff this whole time.
Yeah, I've been continuing my Blender bender. And I know that never gets old, except it definitely does. I think it's funny until I say it in front of somebody and then I see their eyes roll back in their head. And I can see them trying not to punch me. I'm like, okay, maybe I should stop saying that.
It's kind of a dad joke, but okay, yeah.
So yeah, I have basically, since I shipped the demo for the VR bowling thing, I haven't really done much development-wise other than just trying to get better at 3D modeling. And most of that's been in Blender, some in Virtual Studio, and I've played a little bit more with Google Blocks. I just kind of don't like it as much. It's fun to just make a shape, but using that shape feels like a bad idea. Okay. So it's good for gray boxing a model, and then okay, I want it to be about this size and shape. Now I want to go to Virto or Blender and actually make it. It just doesn't seem like, I don't know. I just don't feel like I can be very precise with the tools and blocks. Where the other two I can. Blender I can be incredibly precise, and Virto kind of sits in the middle where I can sit in a coffee shop on my iPad and kind of sketch ideas up with my hand and the Apple Pencil. It's a really cool UI because I can actually, the Virto iPad app, I know he's really pushing the VR version, which is great. But for me, I just want to sit around and be lazy sometimes. And the iPad, pretty much the entire UI I can use with my left thumb, and then all the interactions with the Apple Pencil. So it makes for a really easy, non-RSI inflaming workflow. It's kind of great. And then, yeah, lots and lots of Blender.
So in general, which do you prefer at this point? Have you crossed the threshold where it's like, I think my general go-to is probably Blender, or is Verto still just a little too smooth?
No, I can get more done in Blender.
Okay.
I'm much faster at Blender. Verto is more of I'm relaxing, kicking back, testing an idea, and Blender's more like I'm in a production powerhouse mode.
Gotcha.
In fact, I even have a 18-point checklist and a 45-minute timer for each model, and like it's all.
Now that sounds very, very Joe.
Yeah, exactly. The timer is actually really interesting. So about a week ago, I use that term really loosely. Really interesting. Whenever I say that, I think that means the opposite.
About a week ago, or it's interesting?
No, it's interesting.
Okay.
Whenever I think something's really interesting, it probably isn't. But about a week ago, I was doing making some shapes on a Sunday, and I realized I'd been working on one thing for about an hour and 15 minutes. And it was just a simple thing, and I had just tried a bunch of different stuff and was moving it around, resizing and scaling and adding different loops and extrusions and just kind of having fun. So I realized, like, this is an environment where I can indulge my OCD in an unhealthy way if I'm not careful.
Right.
Where like I could make a simple chair, like a dining room chair, and I could spend 15 years on it.
Yeah.
And never finish it. So it's like, okay, I need to have timers if I'm ever going to get anything done. So I use a high intensity interval training timer app for my exercise. So okay. I made one for Blender. I made a little timer. It's got let me see if I can pull it up. So it's called the lowpoly modeling timer. Project start. I give myself 5 minutes for project start, and that includes like a little bit of Googling around for reference images or writing some notes about what I'm going to make. 25 minutes for the core modeling task, and then at about 30 minutes in, I'll get a beep. That's a wrap up indicator. It means I have about 15 minutes left. That's when I want to start thinking about finishing any of the modeling and start doing the UV cuts and unwrapping the UVs and start doing the texturing. And then I have a 5-minute warning before the time's over. And if it doesn't look like, when that last bell goes off at 5 minutes and it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to finish, then instead of trying to finish, I just go over to the notes file for that model and write out how far I got, maybe take some screenshots and write out maybe what I'm stuck on, and then that goes to the bottom of the list, and I'll come back to it the next day. So it's a very, like you said, a very Joe way of working. Like, it's really easy for me to spend way too much time on one thing, so let's try to put some hard limits on how long I can spend on anything and just keep moving on.
High intensity interval Blender.
Mm-hmm.
That's a website or a blog post at least, if nothing else.
Yeah. So as a result of that, I've gotten 23 objects done. I made a Trello board for this type of thing because I thought that's a really good workflow. So I've got like the ideas list, the work in progress, and the complete list, and then there's also an issues list if I find an issue with something that was complete. And then each one of the cards is based on a template. There's the 3D modeling checklist that has about 10 items or 12 items, and then there's the import into Unity checklist that has another dozen things. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward stuff. Most of it's just like little things I want to forget not to do, like deleting the default camera and lamp in Blender, and like making sure I move the pivot point to the right place, and apply scales and rotations from object mode, things like that.
I think you just said little things you want to forget not to do. I don't know. That's what my brain heard, which is a fascinating phrase. And I'm not sure if it's more fascinating if you said it or if you didn't say it and I heard it. Anyway.
Nice. Well, either way, it's a good show title.
Yeah. So what have you been making?
So I have I will send you a link so you can see. I've been making mostly interior assets, and by that I mean assets that I could use inside a house or an apartment.
Okay.
Just because it's relatively easy stuff, and it's all based on real world objects, so I can just I need to make a bookshelf. Let's go measure my bookshelf and see how it sounds. That was the most Ohio thing I ever said. Measure.
Measure.
It's terrible.
Okay.
Sorry. Every time I hear myself say that, I'm just disgusted. So yeah, I sent you a link to my Sketchfab page, and there's 22 models here. 21 of them are from Blender. The first one on there is actually something I did in Maya a long time ago. But yeah, just nice, simple, jagged shapes. There's a few things that haven't been imported here because I didn't put the book here independently. There's a couple other things.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is a low poly coffee mug.
Yeah. It's very, very low. Most of this is pretty simple. There's a couple of collections on my page. You can see one is the interior thing. I still need to fill that out with everything else. But the other collection is things that are broken, which I thought was interesting to kind of do that publicly. Rather than I better take that down. There's something wrong with it. I'd rather just try to learn from that stuff. So the sofa, the first version of the sofa had some issues with when I was removing doubles. I was on the back of the couch trying to get rid of something and ended up messing up the front of the cushions. So I redid that and just made a whole new sofa to start with. And my super adorable little cactus plant actually just has 8 angons in it, which
I'm sorry, 8 what?
Ngons.
Okay.
Ngons. Ngons are polygons that are have more than four edges.
Okay.
Which makes it confusing for a game engine to triangulate those because it has to guess and it doesn't like guessing. It just wants to split quads.
Okay.
So the easiest way to get rid of an Ngon is just to use the knife tool and cut some new edges in. But in this case, I had already combined that little potted cactus is made up of 5 different meshes, and then I combined them and joined them into one thing without actually splitting the Ngons. So it's really tricky to get inside there to split the ones underneath the dirt. So I didn't. So what I did instead was apply the triangulate modifier, which is a quick fix, and it definitely fixed the issue, but now I can't really work with that cactus anymore. Since it's no longer in quads, it's really hard to actually work with if I wanted to make changes to it. So it is a cactus stuck in time. And it will forever be locked in that configuration. The version on Sketchfab wasn't triangulated, though, so that one's still in quads. But it was a painful learning experience that, I had to cry myself to sleep last night. Yeah, just lots of little stuff. Bookshelves, books, the world's most primitive laptop with a single button on the keyboard.
Okay, hang on a second, going back. Because I looked at the laptop and said, this is why the keyboard on the new Mac laptops sucks. Is because somebody loves that beautiful outline there.
Yeah. That was the only thing I didn't have to look up a reference image for. I just looked down.
It's almost like a self-portrait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just one shape where the keyboard is. And then apparently, I haven't tried it myself, but Job Simulator is quite a popular VR game. And I guess the keyboard they have in Job Simulator just has a 0 and a 1 key, which is kind of delightful.
That's almost like that, what was it? It was the MacBook click wheel that the Onion did.
Yes, yeah. Obnoxious.
Yeah. Anyway.
So
Well,
yeah, I think I'm
awesome.
over the worst of Blender of like getting past the weirdness in the UI and just learning how to use it. I wrote a blog post about this last week, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes in case anybody finds it helpful. There's a link to the article just talks about like why am I using Blender now when I failed to a couple other times, and kind of we talked about last time on the show of like having a guru or having a friend that can help me understand some of the core concepts. It was really helpful. And then I added some links to some of the books and video tutorials that I've done or that I found helpful.
So, and I know that having a guru is a really good mechanism for resolving a misunderstanding, but can you kind of look back on it and tell what the major sticking point was that was making Blender so hard to get before, where it's becoming easier now? Like, not just the instruction, but like, was there something about Blender that now you understand that you didn't get before, and that getting that allowed you to make much more progress?
Yes, many things. I guess the most important one was the non-traditional user interface and user experience. When you first install Blender with a default configuration, the left and right clicks in Blender are switched.
So is what you're saying is the project coordinator is left-handed? Is that what's happening?
The gentleman who made that decision has some very interesting opinions about how a mouse should work.
Okay.
And so yeah, there's that. The windowing is very, how do I put this politely? You know how you're a developer and I'm a developer, and sometimes we think something is an awesome idea because it's possible?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a lot of what the Blender design has been over the years. Although it seems like the last couple of years, they're getting more designers involved. And I think people in general are just becoming more aware of software user experiences. So I think that's kind of pushing Blender into more of a streamlined workflow. But there are definitely some things in the windowing system. It's like that was somebody who figured out how to do something really cool and they shipped that. But it wasn't really cool from a user experience standpoint or from a usability standpoint. It was cool from a programming standpoint. So the windows, you have one application window, and then you have a bunch of tabs, kind of like Unity or Unreal Engine,
okay,
but done badly.
Okay.
Where each tab is a region, and you can't just add new tabs and like in Unity, you can just grab one of the tabs and pull it out and it'll undock from Unity and you can put it wherever you want. That doesn't work like that in Blender. Each region is kind of made up of a series of lines, and as you add additional regions, the only way to add a region is to basically duplicate it and then pull over from or pull down. So you can end up really easily like messing up the default layout, and the only way to get back is to restart Blender, and hopefully you didn't save that as like your settings file. But it's kind of hard to describe in audio. Maybe I'll do a quick video for it just to show what I mean. Anyone who's opened Blender before knows what I'm talking about because it's a real gotcha. And even one of the videos it's kind of awesome. The video in one of the Udemy courses where he's warning us about these issues, he keeps triggering the issues he's warning against, and he's like part laughing and part getting frustrated. It's like I feel your pain, man. Like this is somebody who's been using Blender for like 10 years, and he's like, I just did it again.
Oh.
Yeah. So things like that those were really tripping me up. And also like outside of the Blender specific thing, I've just been struggling with the concepts of 3D modeling in general, and then just having somebody else to watch make some basic shapes and learn how like, hey, not everything has to be made out of a single object. Especially for game assets, sometimes it's okay just to add, if you're making a table, just make legs as separate objects and combine them rather than having loop cuts and extrudes everywhere.
Okay.
So there's lots of other things.
So more composition rather than sculpting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely the type of thing I'm doing is mostly playing with blocks, rather than, a lot of the shapes I've done in this collection are starting as a single object. So I think the laptop is a good example of something that the laptop body, including the screen, is all a single object, but the trackpad and the keyboard are just two smushed down cubes where I deleted the bottom face and then lowered them down to the surface of the laptop. Because that was a much cleaner way and a much more low poly way of actually doing that. If I were to do that the other way that I tried, I would have to end up either subdividing that face many, many times and then recombining some of those, which would leave me a bunch of T-junctions on the sides of that face, or I'd have to loop cut the entire bottom of that and modify things, and I would have many more polygons. So it's that kind of like finding that middle ground of like, how far can I get with this one method, and then can I plop this other method on top of that. Now, again, if I were to do any 3D modeling for like 3D printing, this would be a horrible way to do that, because this is still treated as three separate meshes in that regard, or three different mesh data objects, and they're not literally joined in the same way that a 3D printer would need.
Right.
So you'd have some really messed up stuff. But for Unity, it totally works. Doing that same kind of thing, like leaving things as separate objects. Like the sofa has cushions on the back of it. So there's the sofa object, and there's like pillow 1 and pillow 2 on the back of it. Those are separate objects, and they have their own box collider on them. The sofa has its own series of colliders on it, so that you could actually, if you wanted to, you could attach rigid bodies to the cushions and pick them up and throw them around, but leave the sofa where it is, something like that.
Yeah, so, you're using terminology like T-junctions, and I'm like, okay, so Joe has moved beyond my version of English and into a domain-specific language, and that's totally okay.
But T-junctions and n-gons.
Yes.
Those are two of the big gotchas for Unity, so big things to watch out for. So yeah, well, it's really fun stuff. Having the timer has been really helpful. I don't always even start the timer. I'm just used to, I use that a lot the first couple of days, and now I'm kind of used to how long mentally a model should take me. And if I feel like I'm spinning my wheels or scaling my vertices too much, then it's time to stop and work on something else.
I like it. So, how's the bowling thing going?
So the bowling thing, I haven't really done much to it. I've got a couple of small changes to make to it. I've got some new songs to put in from my friend Tony, and just some input from a couple people who tried it last week. Asked me to turn the music levels down and the sound effects up a little bit.
Okay.
Things like that. I did apply for the Vive Studios thing and haven't heard anything back. Don't really expect to, but it was worth doing anyway. And other than that, I'm not really sure what else I'm going to do with it. And that's a good segue, because I was at the COG meeting, the Central Ohio Game Dev Group, on Friday night, and the organizer of a retro gaming con called Korgs was there, and he asked me to bring the bowling thing and set up a VR demo there, and that would be a really good opportunity to show 1,000 people my product if I make it into a product. And that's the part that I'm kind of stuck on. Like, do I want to do that? Do I have time to do that? And I'm just not sure. I've got about 2.5 weeks, or I've got about a week to decide. I need to follow up with him by Saturday or so. But I'm just not sure. Like, I need to spend some time doing FileMaker work for the next couple of months. I haven't really seen enough of a response on itch.io to justify, like, no one's aside from people who've seen it at COG and other user groups and maybe some listeners of the podcast, I don't think anybody else outside of those groups have even clicked on that link. It hasn't gotten very many page views or downloads, so it's like, I know itch.io is not the best place to be pushing VR stuff, but it just doesn't seem like a good idea to put it on Steam because it's not a product. It's an idea. So I don't know if I want to go show 1,000 people a thing that may never happen on one hand. On the other hand, I don't know if I want to spend the time and the money between now and the next couple of weeks doing that. I'd have to make some changes to the app. I'd have to buy some accessories for the Vive, so I'm not letting other people wear my face mask. Trying to put that as nice as possible.
Doesn't the Vive have 2 little face thingies?
I've used both of them.
Oh.
And I bought replacements.
Okay.
I like a nice clean faceplate.
Well, sure. But you only need one for all of them.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. People sweat in them and it gets really nasty. Yeah. It's not good.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, short of picking up another set of the little face rings, foam face rings, I don't know that you need to do much. Go. See if people like it. If you become the hit of the show, then you know you've got something.
Yeah.
And if if everybody's like, oh, that's nice, then, if people are getting out of your experience going, ooh, I got to get me some VR, then you've got a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that could just be the big question.
Yeah, I just don't know that this game is going to do that for anybody. Like I said, it was definitely a valuable learning experience, but I don't think it's exciting enough. I'm trying to put myself in that position of would I have been super impressed by this? And I don't think so. I think things like the lab or super hot were much more impressive from a like, wow, this is what VR is standpoint. And now, have you heard of Beat Saber?
I've heard the name, but I haven't seen it.
It's definitely something that I want. I'm not going to get it yet because it's going to be my reward for the next time I ship a product. But basically you have, it's a rhythm game in VR where you have lightsabers. And it just looks like a ton of fun. And it's only been out maybe a week or two, and it seems to be doing really, really well. That's the kind of stuff that I keep seeing more and more tweets on the internet of like, this, and I just tried to Beat Saber, I have to get VR. Like, I don't think the bowling game is going to get that reaction. Could be wrong, but I don't know. It really does come down to how much work I get. I've got a couple meetings this week in the FileMaker world since I haven't gotten any Unity subcontracting. I had to go back to the FileMaker world for a while. So I may be about to be well, it's not even a sentence. I may be getting really busy.
Okay.
For the next couple of months. So who knows? That's why I've been working on 3D modeling rather than continue working on the bowling thing or start another game. The 3D modeling thing is like each model is a tiny little 45-minute project as opposed to something that I'm becoming like intellectually invested in for a couple of weeks or months. Mm-hmm. And then by the time I do have an idea, I'll have a ton of 3D models that I can pull from to prototype stuff out. So yeah, I'm still on the fence. You haven't convinced me. I haven't convinced me.
I'm not saying you put it to market. I'm just saying your total investment for doing the show and getting much greater exposure is relatively small. Getting a lot of exposure and doing nothing with the exposure is okay. That's legal. You can go, nope, if you want to play this game, you got to find me.
Yeah.
Which isn't true because they can play it on itch.io.
Yeah.
So your total investment is a few hours of your time and the cost of some face rings for the mask. That's your investment. And if you get nothing out of it aside from getting to show more people your stuff, that's not bad.
All right.
And
I'll think about it.
You never know if one of those people might be the one that goes, hey, actually, this reminds me of something that we wanted to do at work.
Well, that's the thing. It's a retro gaming con, and I have a feeling that a bunch of a very special kind of nerd with their Ataris and Commodore 64s are going to look at my VR technology and declare me a heretic and throw cartridges at me.
Yeah, but you're using your super high-tech stuff to be able to go bowling, which is about as retro as it gets. Like, Joe, this is fine. And if they don't want to, they don't. You know, they go hang out with a one-button joystick and they can play those games, but if they want to try something more elaborate, you're there. And particularly if you're the only VR one there. I mean, who knows? It might be just a couple of hours of you sitting there and nobody wanting to demo your thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. If nothing else, if they're spending all of their time playing retro games, a lot of them won't have even gotten a chance to be in VR.
Yeah, that's true.
So if all you end up doing is talking to people and giving them, you know, the really gentle onboarding process, the personal guided tour, that's okay too. You're building a larger audience for VR in general. Go be an ambassador, Joe.
Nice. Will you go with me?
When is it?
June 2nd.
Almost certainly. June 2. June 2 appears to have nothing scheduled on it. So,
right.
Sure, I'll go.
All right. We'll talk about it later.
Okay.
Anyway, so a couple quick things before I pass it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Since you were out of town, you missed the Columbus VR meetup. And we talked, it was a discussion about networking games in Unity, and particularly VR games and experiences. And it started as more of a presentation and turned into more of just a discussion about what people were using, and some pretty cool stuff there. A lot of it was over my head, and so I didn't quite get a lot of it. But it was a pretty short discussion, and then lots of just like, let's hang out and do VR stuff. And so it was a much smaller meeting than the last one we went to. And I got to try 2 headsets, one of which wasn't anything new. It was the Dell version of the Windows Mixed Reality headset. It's very similar to the Samsung and the Lenovo I have. It's a better build quality than the Lenovo. It comes with a lot more weight to it, but it's not nearly as good as the Samsung Odyssey.
Okay.
So kind of in between those two. I think it's still the same resolution as the Lenovo Explorer, but
okay.
The screen was definitely brighter. But the cool thing about trying that one is it was attached to an MSI backpack laptop. So
you could just stroll around.
Cool. Yeah. And of course, we're in this massive event room where there's plenty of room to just walk around. And there was a couple of times where somebody was trying a different headset that I'll talk about in a second, and somebody else was wearing that one, and they're like walking into each other. It's like, this is what VR meetups are supposed to be. 2 people in their own worlds ignoring each other. So yeah, that's a pretty cool idea. It was surprisingly light. This backpack couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 pounds. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it was very, very light especially compared to my 10-pound laptop that becomes a 20-pound backpack when I put it on.
Yeah, your laptop is a little over-engineered.
Yeah,
but I like it too. Like it's good.
The power brick is 4 pounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gets a bit much. But the other thing I got to try was the Oculus Go, which is the standalone headset from Oculus. This is a 3 degree of freedom standalone headset with inside-out tracking type thing. And it's inexpensive. It's $200. It plays the entire Gear VR content library, and I think there's relatively the same APIs. I know there's some additional features that the Oculus Go has that the Gear VR headsets and phones don't. But for the most part, I think developing for them is pretty similar. But I didn't get to try it too long, maybe just about a minute. I just wanted to put it on and see how it looked. So I don't really have anything to say about content or user experience or anything like that. What I think was amazing is the lenses were just on a whole different level.
Really?
No rings, no a huge field of view, no like getting the headset just in the right place. It was perfect clarity.
Huh. Okay.
And I have no idea what they're doing differently from the others that I've tried, but these were perfect, at least to my eyes. Like, I want these lenses in everything right now. In fact, they're so good that a bunch of people have started buying Oculus Go's just to take the lenses out and put them on their Rift.
Really?
Yeah. So that's a thing that's happening already.
$200 lens upgrade. Okay.
And but I guess the headset itself has done really, really well. It's gotten pretty good reception. Facebook had their conference and gave a whole bunch of them out there to all their attendees. But yeah, it seems to be doing pretty well. It almost seems kind of like a almost pathetic response from Google launching their standalone headset a couple of days after that, and then Vive sort of announcing dev kits for the Vive Focus. So I think they're like, oh wait, Oculus is doing something. We need to hurry up and do something too. But both of them are coming in much more expensive. They're both six degree of freedom headsets, so they're better in many ways, but twice the price for the I think it's a Lenovo something from that has the Daydream platform, and then Vive making the Vive Focus that runs with Viveport. It's been out in China for a couple of months now, and it's coming to the US soon. And I think it's going to be closer to $600 or $700 for that. So it's like, yeah, these both have better features, but that's a big price point or a big price difference. If people are having fun with the 3 degree of freedom thing, then what can developers do to really kind of push the limits of design for that environment and make as much content for it while that's the norm? Because I have no idea if it's going to take off and be a super successful thing, or if it's just kind of a splash in the pan. It's definitely interesting to see people be that excited over a 3 degree of freedom headset.
Yeah, as we've previously discussed, the 3 degree of freedom headsets do not work well for me.
Yeah. Not impressed.
Well, it's not so much not impressed. It's visually disturbing to me when the world it breaks VR is what it does. Yeah. So it would probably be great if I was sitting on the couch.
Yeah, and that's how I use my Daydream.
But just the tiniest bit of leaning, it was just as I'm standing and shifting from one foot to another, like stuff in the world looks like it's moving around. And I know it's not moving around. It's staying perfectly stationary while I'm moving. But in my VR sense, that feels like I'm moving and they're moving away from me. And it's really unsettling.
Yeah, it's good for passive content. It's good for videos. It's very good for videos, honestly. But it's also good for games that have kind of a third-person view where you're maybe directing a player with a controller. There's a couple games like that I've played, like Lola and the Giant, and a couple other ones. There's also there's a few Daydream games that I really like, but these are sit on the couch games or sit in my comfy swivel chair games, not moving around, things like that. The one thing that I think, if anybody's listening and thinking about doing some 3 degree of freedom stuff, I would almost prefer all of the games have kind of a narrower focus rather than make a game that you can turn around and look all over the world. Just keep the user facing in a direction and rotate the world as needed. So give me not so much a 180, but maybe a 140 degree field of play where I can literally sit down comfortably on the couch and lean back and put my feet up and not have to, get up and turn around, things like that. So that I think that would work for a lot of games.
It's an interesting design constraint. I wonder if you could do fun stuff with that.
I think so.
To make it look really cool that way.
Yeah, I've seen a couple endless runners on Daydream. That's kind of fun, where you can just use the trackpad on the controller to go left and right, and you're kind of a follow cam. You're not actually the object that's moving.
Okay.
And Google has a bunch of stuff built into, I think it's in the Daydream Elements app. There's a follow cam that handles a bunch of really smooth movement. So the follow cam isn't like locked to the player object in the same way that we would normally think of. It only responds to big movements, and you can kind of adjust that on a per app basis, so you can make some pretty smooth stuff. So yeah, I'm sure Oculus has those same kind of features in their SDK. I haven't tried it yet, but yeah. So I was pretty impressed with the lenses. I don't have much to say about the rest of the headset. I don't really know anything about it. It was a very nice build quality. It does have some kind of integrated speakers into the headband, but I'm not sure how they work because they don't cover your ears. And where I was at was too loud to hear anything from them. So
okay.
Other than that, it was
at
a very
$200.
Nice
they're probably not bone conduction.
Yeah, I doubt that. But yeah, it was some neat stuff. I'm on the fence for whether or not I should get one because it was a nice looking headset and it has some nice content and some nice lenses. But I still don't like Facebook. So there's that.
Hey, speaking of Facebook, how's that for a transition?
Nice.
I've been taking another look at VRTK because I've been taking a look at VRTK because I hadn't previously looked because you were cutting trail at that point. And you were like, hey, this looks really neat, but it's got some issues, and it looks like they're not going to support it, and so I'm not going to look at it anymore. And I went, okay, well, thanks for chasing that down for me. I appreciate it. I'll just not bother.
Yeah, so I get the segue. You mean because Oculus has funded VRTK for another version?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you didn't get the...
It took me a minute.
Facebook to Oculus to VRTK. Yeah. So, as we mentioned, I think last time, they got funding, which they wanted. So they are going to be doing a new version of VRTK V4. Because they've announced it. It's like a 2-hour live stream where they're answering people's questions and talking about future plans and whatever like that. Which
yeah,
all sounds...
I still haven't watched that.
No. There's some neat stuff in there. They were talking about rewriting a lot of stuff, like taking the opportunity to refactor a bunch of things, making it easier to get in and integrate and get started and access the power that they've got.
Well, so much of these things have changed since they started VRTK. Like the Steam VR asset that I use or you can get in the asset store isn't necessary, strictly speaking, in Unity anymore. When that was launched, you had to use that because that was the only way to interact with Steam VR stuff. But now Unity has built-in OpenVR support APIs, and you can call those directly. You can still use the Steam VR stuff as a convenience layer if you find it convenient, but you don't have to. And VRTK was built around using that Steam VR library. So you basically have two abstraction layers between you and the OpenVR SDK. The way it stands now. So I know he's wanted to redo that for a while. The one thing, maybe you're going to touch on this, but one of the guys at the VR meetup, when they were talking about this news, he mentioned, yes, it's great news. No, you shouldn't start using VRTK right now because I haven't chased it to myself. Maybe you have, but I guess there's not going to be a transition from the current VRTK 3 point whatever to 4 point something. It's going to be a new product and you're going to have to start over from that point. So maybe don't go download VRTK and start learning it, if that's true. I haven't found out. I haven't found any references to that yet, but I haven't looked.
I did see that he did say that 2018.1 will be the minimum Unity version supported.
Okay,
by
that
4.
makes sense.
That he's not going to try and backload any of that stuff, including even to the 2017.4 support version.
Yeah.
So that was a thing. Yeah, I was mostly just looking, kind of getting a sense of what was going on. There was a fun video I was watching on the grab mechanisms. And I was just really impressed by the quantity of thought that went into capturing likely variations in grab modes and the strengths and limitations of each, and that all of these were just relatively supported things. And then in a couple of spots how he was compositing them. For example, in picking up a fire extinguisher and in your other hand grabbing the hose and being able to control the pressure with your left hand while controlling direction with the right hand, and using some joints in between to kind of fake up a hose real quick. Because he was doing very, very low poly examples, which is all fine. Or there was another one that was a pistol, and when you gripped the pistol, there was this huge ultra low poly slide on top of the gun. So you had to cock the gun by grabbing the slide and pulling it back. And so the slide had a different grab mechanism than the gun itself, which was kind of slick.
Yeah.
So watching these videos was just like this constant barrage of interesting little ideas of just little pieces of interaction that he had cleared brush for, and that it would make them a little easier to interact with, in theory.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of sample scenes in VRTK of just different gestures and ways to interact with objects and combine objects and buttons and gears and just all kinds of stuff. And what I particularly liked about it is they're all Unity primitives. He didn't bog you down with a bunch of animations and complex meshes. Just like, nope, here's a cube, here's a sphere, here's a plane, and here's how to teleport on that and pick up the cube and throw it off the plane.
Yeah.
Simple stuff like that. So
yeah, it really let the mechanisms and the behaviors speak for themselves. And I saw what they could become without him having to, okay, here's a 3,000 poly monster that we're going to shoot with the gun. It was like, that's irrelevant at this point. So yeah, that was neat. Digging around in there, I found the link to his roadmap, which I'm not sure if it's been updated since the 4.0 announcement. But his entire roadmap and all the features and bugs and things like that he's dealing with are all on a site called waffle.io.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Which was a very... what was the one you were looking at for plotting out all your 3D models you were going to do?
I've been using Trello.
Trello, that was it. Think of it as like a low poly Trello. It was much more programmer-y, which in some ways I think is probably almost better. But it was kind of neat to look at that and see what was going on and ideas and the collaborative element that was happening within the community at that level. I also always have a lot of respect for people who put all those bug lists out public. Like, here's everything that's wrong. Everything that we've got documented that's wrong with what I'm doing. Here, take a look. Dig through it. There was somebody on there who was asking, they were building a feature for supporting hamster ball movement.
Okay.
Which, there's a great animation for it that linked from there. I'll find you the link. But it involved, like, you're in a sphere, And using the controllers, you reach out in front of you and grab the sphere and move it, and it produces smooth forward or side-to-side motion, and you can, like, knock things over and you rotate. So it's like your feet are frictionless. But you're just moving your hands to do this. And it just looked really compelling. I really kind of wanted to do Marble Madness, but you're the marble. It was kind of like we had talked about attaching a camera to like a bowling ball.
Yeah.
And just watching the thing flip around. It would be like that, except the camera isn't flipping around.
Yeah,
it's nicely smooth inside. So doing ramps and picking up acceleration and things like that was just all a really interesting movement style.
So I had an idea recently about, whenever we're talking about VR movement, the conversation is always about dealing with simulator sickness and motion sickness and what can we do to make it easier for people. And I was just sarcastically griping about nobody cares about me. Where's my VR movement? And I don't get sickness. But, like, where's all the extreme VR movement? So I came up with a really bad idea that I haven't prototyped yet, but I think it would be hilarious. Basically, you've got your two controllers as your hands. You've got some kind of mesh object that you can interact with on your head, and you can grab that and pick it up and throw it. You can throw your head around. So that's how I want to move in VR. So I was actually thinking about implementation, because as soon as you grab that object, how do you actually move your controller relative to the head? You kind of can't. Like, they're locked in at that point. So I was thinking the object, while the hand is holding it, your camera stays at the starting position. So say you're standing there in a T-pose, you reach over, you grab the head object and pick it up. Your camera doesn't move at that point. It's only after you let go of it, when you throw it, that's when the camera snaps to the origin of that object in motion. And then you could do some stabilizing stuff in there if you didn't want to be spinning around like an idiot. But I may actually prototype that and just see if it's fun, because it sounds fun.
Two things on that. One, if you look at one of the grabbing and interaction videos for VRTK, he's got an example in there of grabbing things using basically like a spring joint. Mm-hmm. And so you've grabbed it and you've got relatively tight control over it, but not exact control. Like the thing isn't bound, it's chained to your hand, not super glued to your hand. And so it could still have rotation in things. So you could continue to move your head around while you're holding it up in your arm, which would be bizarre. And I've been trying, knowing how you are with movement and such in VR, I've been suggesting a couple of times that you really need to make the Vomit Comet game. That, like, this is a game that is designed to do everything it possibly can to make you vomit in VR. Like, nice. Beginning to end, the worst VR experience ever. And I think people would do it in the same way they, like, you know, eat a spoonful of cinnamon or something. Like, I think it would sell, Joe. You could just keep making it worse and worse and worse.
See, I just think it would be fun to go into VR chat or one of the social platforms where you can have your own avatar, and as you're talking to somebody, just pick up your head and throw it across the room. It's like, wait, what just happened? Or just throw it at somebody you disagree with. Oh yeah, here's my face.
There was an early social MMO game thing, kind of like a precursor to Second Life, where one of the common trollish things to do was meet new players as they got off the boat in this new land and be like, hey, there's all sorts of cool stuff you can do in here. Like, you can take your head off and give it to somebody. They, like, take their head off and kind of wave it around, put their head back on. Here, take your head off and, like, hand it to me. And they hand it to them and they run away with your head. So there's all, like, your head respawns in like 24 hours, but there's all these headless noobs walking around like, I don't have a head, I'm new. I guess everybody gets caught by this. This is a great first user experience. See, here's the thing, Joe. I think the Vomit Comet idea is so good that I would make it if I could.
if you
But
could.
I can't test that game, Joe. I can't do it 1,000 times. You're the only one who can make this.
Does it come with some kind of HMD attachment, like a barf bag?
No, just a you need to like digitally sign here before you're allowed to enter the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll think about it. Might be a hard time demoing that in public.
That also would be tough. No. This is one that goes directly to Steam, Joe. It goes directly to Steam. And you just keep coming up with more and more terrible, horrible things to do to human beings' inner ears.
Nice. I can mess with all kinds of spatial audio at the same time.
Oh, God. Yeah, you can hear the fire engine sirens approaching, and then they just suddenly like start going up while the siren continues going along in front of you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Really, really disorienting.
Nice. So we have one more topic to talk about. I guess, do you want to kick this one off?
Sure. After this FileMaker conference, there were I got really motivated to kind of work on my day job stuff a bunch more. And I'm going to kind of focus there for probably the next couple months. And I'm going to need to kind of go on a bit of a hiatus.
Okay.
I'm not saying I'm saying goodbye forever, but I am not going to be able to put in the time on game development for the next couple of months that I really feel I should be putting in to be able to be conversationally useful in this discussion.
Okay.
And we're having discussions about exactly what that means podcast-wise, mm-hmm. how the impact is, and how much Joe's going to be doing with that. And we don't have anything to really announce regarding that today.
Yeah.
But
so as of now, episode 40, we're going to go on to some kind of hiatus, and that may be a couple of months for both of us, where we just don't have anything for a while. Or maybe I may look into, after talking with Dave, I may look into a couple of guest hosts for a while. Maybe one guest host for the summer, or just a couple of rotating guests depending on availability. I may also consider doing some short interviews with other VR content creators, particularly people who are actually just making stuff. I'm not as interested about talking about VR startups and VR as an abstract, cool idea, but people who are actually making stuff in VR, whether they're doing 3D modeling or building games or making 360 videos or even writing stories about VR. I think that could be kind of a cool potential spin-off idea. So yeah, we don't really know what's going to happen yet. So yeah, I don't know. You'll hear something from me on Twitter within the next couple of weeks. But if you, dear listeners, have any suggestions or something you would like to see happen, please let me know on Twitter. And it would be helpful to get as much input as I can on that. And not to put you on the spot, Dave, and mm-hmm. I can edit this out if you don't want to do this, but we could always dust our old show off and do that one every couple of weeks mm-hmm. while we're working in that other industry, because I'm going to be doing a bunch of FileMaker work too.
So we can just go back to being massively unqualified.
Mm-hmm. That's an idea as well.
That may well happen.
So we may just switch RSS feeds for a while, or some combination of those ideas. Nothing's decided yet. We should try to. Obviously, feel free to say no to this, but we should try to do an episode beginning of June, which is about a year into starting this. But we'll try to think about that at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll record at the KorgsCon. That's going to be an excellent recording environment for a podcast.
The delighted squeals of all your adoring fans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, that's our show for today. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm VR Hermit _Dave.
And I'm VR Hermit _Joe. Thank you for listening.